welcome everyone. Yeah, so as Kate said, I am the chair of the TV committee for the Guild. I'm also a writer, and I do quite a lot. I've done quite a lot of children's, and my sort of particular area of expertise or experience is live action drama for 7 to 11s, but I've done a lot of other things as well. I do other sorts of writing, as do all our panelists. If I went through all their credits, it would take the entire session. But Gail Renard also writes comedy and novels, and she has worked on some of the most iconic children's programs, including The Famous Five, Chucklevision, and Pipkins. And she has recently created and made Monty and Co., which is with a lot of the Pipkins talent, and she made the show and sold it to the BBC. So she'll be talking about that later. Darren also is known sort of particularly to me as a writer of sci-fi. He's he obviously does adult scripts as well, but he's very experienced in animation particularly, and he's done Tree Foo Tom, Peter Rabbit, and Bob the Builder. Lucia Haynes is a journalist, has written a lot of adult drama, and also she's recently done some children's, including Jojo and Gran Gran, and she's writing on the new Julia Donaldson show Princess Mirabelle. So, and I know she's done a lot of other original children's work as well. So we've got quite a wide range of experience on the panel, and I think children's, as the sort of as the headline of the session says, children's is quite a wide. A very wide craft area, covering everything from shows for very tiny ones up to teenagers. So I'm going to just ask everybody briefly about their experience, and the question which I'm going to start with is, how did you get into children's TV, and what was your first show? Darren, if we could start with you.
Okay. Well, I from a young age always wanted to get into TV and film. I think probably ever since I saw Star Wars, that probably was it. And I did a film degree and then eventually got into events. So I was working in animation festivals and the animation awards. And from there, through meeting people, I got a job as an assistant to a producer who was making the remake of Captain Pugwash. Back in the late 90s. So I ended up editing animatics to that, and he must have seen something in me and gave me the job as a film editor. So that started a ball rolling in which I was a film editor for 10 years working in animation, but was always writing. And the trouble is, once you get into a role, I think people kind of pigeonhole you a bit. So trying to get out of editing then into writing was quite tough. But I'm again, through those 10 years, making more contact, I met, it was Jackie Edwards actually, who was at that point a producer about to produce Frankenstein's Cat, and I badgered her several times over a year to let me have a go. And I think it was just going into production, and she sort of said, yeah, you can have a go. So I did a couple of, I did an outline to an episode, and they liked it, and I did one episode, and that turned into 3 episodes on that show. So from then on, it kind of started a bit of a snowball, and the head writer on that took me on to his next show. Yes. And it kept going. So that's kind of how I got into it.
That's great. So I think it can be a lot of people's experience that when you've sort of proved yourself on one children's show, you will be offered a lot of similar work. I think and it's interesting, you said you had to persuade them to give you a chance as a writer when you'd been editing. I think, we all experience issues of being pigeonholed, because Gail, you've said before that it's important to try to avoid being pigeonholed and prove what you can do, haven't you?
Oh, yes. I mean, never let anyone pigeonhole you, because you decide what you want to do. And I mean, as long as you sort of work at something, and write the script or have your calling card or whatever. I've written across all genres, and I'm sure everyone else has too. and there's nothing. They always say, no matter what you wrote last, they'll go, oh, she's a children's lady, oh, she's a comedy lady. You know, I can do without labels, you know. We'll decide for ourselves what we write.
I think that's a very important principle. Because Lucia, you've written lots of different things, haven't you? I know you've written for continuing drama. How did you get into children's? How did that happen?
So on and off, just through the years, I've kind of pitched various, original ideas, and I think my name was just floating. Yeah. So last year, I was asked to join the Princess Mirabelle team. Yeah, and which was just a delight from start to finish. It was just brilliant. Glorious, and the way that's a show that everyone's excited about because it's based on a Julia Donaldson book, isn't it? Well, that's it, and we got to make the great Julia as well, and so the way it worked was that one of the writers was adapting the material from the book, and the other writers were pitching original ideas based on the characters. Yes. So that was just fun to do. And so from that, then I was asked to do Jojo and Gran Gran, and then Biff, Chip and Kipper, which is another drama as well. Because once they know that you can do it, I think, and they know that they can trust you to sort of deliver, then they ask you to do more. Yes, so yes. So both of you, Darren and Lucia, you both found that yes, you make a contact with one company and people like your work, and then it does lead to other offers. And it seems to, I think it's partly because our panelists are excellent, but it does seem to happen particularly quite a lot in children's. I think that once people know that you're around and you can do it, you will be offered at first similar work, and then, as Gail says, it's important to, if you don't wish to be pigeonholed, it's important to keep doing other things and proving that you can. Gail, do you want to talk a bit about how you first got into children's?
Okay, well, I started with comedy. I knew I wanted to be a comedy writer when I was 11, but I didn't actually sell until I was 16. I sold sketches and things. And I actually, again, there was a lot of luck, and also, it's a word Darren just used, badgering. You're going to hear that a lot. Let's give it the polite version of being proactive. And I wrote to various things. And at 19, I got onto an ITV sitcom. And I was very lucky to cut my teeth there doing episodes. But it was, that's when ITV had the different franchises, and I did a lot at that time at ATV. And it's what everyone's saying, once you were in the building, very often they would ask you to do other things. And they were doing a children's sitcom, which we're going way back, called Kids from 47A. And they asked me if I would be interested, and things were a lot easier then. I met with the producer over a cup of tea. We hit it off, but by hit it off, we also knew that what's important is that you can work with people and you're on the same wavelength and running along the same tracks. And after a meeting, we realized I was, and he offered it to me, and I ended up script editing as well as writing a lot of the episodes. And then, I did other ATV shows, but going between comedy and children's, which I still do. Yes. And there's not a lot of difference between them, except children get the jokes faster.
I think as all of our panelists, I think all of us work write for sort of so-called adult work as well. And there's a question here about what's your experience of writing for different age groups. I think personally, I guess I've sort of found a slightly sweet spot in the sort of 7 to 11-year-olds. I think I prefer writing for older children rather than the younger age group, which I sort of usually find a bit more of a struggle. Lucia, how do you find writing for different age groups? Because obviously you've done a wide variety of different age.
I've mostly done CBeebies, the Jojo and Gran Gran, or the top end. So you're talking about preschoolers to the sort of, you know, 7-year-olds, that sort of age. And, you know, I love it because it allows you to indulge in your sort of kiddie self. And you just have to remember what that felt like and what you found amazing and what you were curious about, and just tap into it. So I find it very refreshing. And last year when I was doing Jojo and Gran Gran, and I was also writing a Radio 4 crime drama, which was very grisly and very dark. And so one day you would literally be writing the grisly dark crime drama and then switching to do the magic and the lightness of Jojo and Gran Gran. Yes. And I loved being in those different psychological worlds. And ultimately, I think it's about telling a good story. I think that's what children deserve, and that's what they want. And no matter whether they're 3 years old, 4 years old, 15, you know, children want to be transported to another world and, you know, to immerse themselves in a story. So I think the principles of storytelling are the same for me across children and adults.
I agree, and I think and I think if anything, I think in children's, we know that our audience will be, I mean, I always think our audience will be paying very strong attention, and you know, we sort of don't get away with some of the plot holes or papering over the cracks that certain adult dramas might try to get away with, because I think because our audience are watching with great attention, and they will notice. I think, you know, it's an audience which sort of deserves to be very much respected. Darren, how do you find writing for different age groups?
Yeah, I've written on both sort of preschool and older kids. I think I agree with Lucia that the principles of storytelling are the same. I think with the younger kids, you have to be a bit more aware of comprehension so that they can understand what the structure of the story and what your dialogue in the story. And also, there's very much you know, the being aware of how much jeopardy you can put characters in and imitable behaviour. Like in a preschool show, you might have a character that needs to climb a ladder, but you might have an adult character that has to hold the ladder. So yes, it's just thinking around things. Things aren't impossible to do. I think you just have to think around things that way. Older kids, I think you maybe can be a bit naughtier with that, with your jokes and things. I mean, both. You know, the joy of working for kids is just how imaginative you're allowed to be, and how how far you can go with pushing ideas and jokes. That's the joy of it, really.
Yes. Do you agree, Gail?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I've written across all the age groups, from preschool. I mean, we say from 0 to 5, because it's fascinating, because I've seen 4-month-olds watching, let's say, Monty and Co. or whatever, and they might not get the storyline, but they like the color and the movements and the songs, and you'll see them dancing along and jiggling along. So I've done preschool, I've done the older and teenage as well. They each come, they're lovely. They each come with their own audiences and challenges. But when you do for very, very little, it's lovely because you get it down to the simplest and purest elements, because it's what Lucy was saying. It's whatever their, you know, what a wee one's references are going to be. And but that's good. But also, what's the two things that are important is that anything I do, you have to remember it's not only going to be the kiddies watching, you know, if very often it's older siblings or a grown-up or parents, and you want them to find something in it too, that they're not just going to sit there and go, oh, when's this going to be over? So it's possible to do family entertainment when still writing for very, very little ones. And the other thing is, which is probably a separate subject, writing for children is a wonderful responsibility, because children's books and children's telly stays with them very often forever. And you get grown-ups coming to you and going, oh, you know, I used to rush home from school to see your show, which makes you feel really old. And you go, well, I rushed home from school to write it. but it is important to children, and they see, and it's important children see their own identities reflected back to them, which is why British television and British children's television is so important, because they can't just have a diet of American, children's sitcoms or Japanese animation. You want to see, Britain reflected back.
That's a very important point, and I think there is, and I personally find that there is. I love to sort of try to create what could be family entertainment, and I think we're very aware of that huge responsibility, because obviously, although as children's shows are no longer shown on BBC One as they used to, and people have such a wider choice, you don't get the same audience share as you used to, say, when I was growing up, where everyone would watch the same thing. You know that the children or the young people who have chosen to watch your show are making a huge commitment to it, and you meet people, young adults, who remember watching your shows when they were a child, and you realise you were an important part of their life. It was interesting that a few years ago they did a survey of Britain's favourite books. I think they did sort of a top 100, and then they made a documentary about the top 10, and an enormous percentage of those books were, and they were just, adults were voting for their favourite ever book. An enormous percentage of those books were either children's books or books that you would read as a young person, for instance, as a school set text, like To Kill a Mockingbird or even Pride and Prejudice. So I think what people consume when they are young is that they will remember it all their lives, which brings me on to a question about the longevity of children's work. And I think some of this work will be repeated a lot and stand the test of time, won't it, Gail?
Oh, I mean, yes, because if you're writing for preschool, you have a whole new audience every 3 years. It could be their older siblings, it's different, new children. So that's quite a turnover, and that's fantastic, especially if you own the format or are producing the series and getting income from it, even as a writer, because you'll keep getting money from it. And for older kids, because I've also worked for Disney a lot, and they always had a pattern of re-releasing their Disney films once every 7 years, because for older children, there's a whole new audience every 7 years. So especially, and this sounds terrible, puppets don't age. they look very well on it. And if you do a period piece like The Famous Five, I've been getting residuals from that for 30 years.
Wow.
Because, I mean, we have we will make modern classics, but certain shows do stand the test of time. So children's can, I mean, touch wood, children's can be lucrative.
Yes. I mean, I worked on the story of Tracy Beaker, which I think I first worked on in 2004, and those episodes are still being watched and enjoyed. Lucia, I'm sure you're newer to this, so you've got all this to look forward to. Hopefully, Princess Mirabelle will be still being enjoyed by children in 30 years' time. Darren, do you still see your old shows being repeated?
Oh yes, I think that's the beauty of animation, is that it travels very well, as it can be dubbed into many languages without too much problem. So if you have a successful show that goes around the world, that can be, that can last for years and years. I think just thinking back, I think Peter Rabbit, I think we started those, I think they've started broadcasting about 2012, 13. And I think we finished making them about 2015, so there haven't been made any new ones for 5 years, and it's still on CBBS now.
Yes.
Another show, Zoo, which is a French show, which was for Disney, which has gone all around the world, South America, all over. Again, that was about 2011, 2012. And that just keeps going and going. And so you keep seeing these shows pop up on YouTube, sometimes dubbed into Spanish or Portuguese, and it's great to think that they're being shown all over the world and getting to a big audience.
Yes, I mean, it's great to see that the reach and the audience that children's work has, and that can be very gratifying. But also, is it lucrative? That brings me on to my next question, which is how profitable is children's TV writing compared to other genres? Gail, what would you say about this?
Sorry, about being lucrative?
Yes, how profitable is it compared to other genres is the question.
Well, it's like anything. If you're working, it's lucrative. When you're not, it isn't. You know, we've all gone through phases of not being able to get arrested, but and the repeat system is changing, but children's is very lucrative. And now you have to remember, which we'll get into at some point, all the different platforms. There's something like 2,000 children's platforms globally, and they're all potential outlets for you. And that's very cheering. You know, money can come from all directions. It might not be immediately. There might be a lot of jam tomorrow spread out, but you know, it's an exciting time to be in children's because all the old rules have changed, and also we're changing the rules, which is even better.
Yes. Lucia, obviously you've written for a lot of the continuing dramas. How do you find the profitability of children's compared to that?
You know, as you were talking, I was just thinking, and I think, you know, pound for pound, minute by minute, it's probably quite comparable in terms of rates of pay. But children's tends to be shorter. So you might be writing an 8-minute script or a 10-minute script. I think Mirabelle was 23 pages, 23 minutes. So that affects, you know, if you're doing pro rata, that affects your rate. So, you know, adults will pay more, but adults is longer. So that may be the reason why, you know.
But also in children's, you do get the subsequent use advance, which you don't on some soaps. Yeah. So the subsequent use advance, for those who don't know, is 100% against future royalties, which is payable on principal photography. So that that does bump up the rate quite considerably compared to, say, doctors. So, and the Guild has very much fought to keep that going. So so that is you know, that is an interesting thing to note. So some people are pleasantly surprised by what children's does pay. Darren, did you want to say?
I was just say yes. Animation is probably maybe not initially as lucrative as, say, a comedy or live action, because it's always a buyout.
That's true.
So we don't get those subsequent use payments. And like I said before, because it travels well and because it is repeated a lot, so like I say, Peter Rabbit is still being shown now, it can down the line end up being a bit quite more lucrative, and you can make your fees back sort of 2 or 3 times, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Gail?
Yeah, and I was going to add to that, because now we get paid, there are a couple of more sort of residuals that come directly to us, which is the Writers' Digital Payments, which is run by the Writers Guild and the agents. And that's basically every time your work appears on catch-up services, whether it's you know, BBC iPlayer or ITV Hub, you get micropayments and a check every, you know, not a check, money in your account every year, and ALCS. And ALCS is wonderful, but it does drive me a little crazy when people go, oh, it's free money from ALCS. Yes. No, we earned the money. Our shows are still selling around the world, and ALCS have secondary royalties like retransmission rights in Hungary and things like that. So we're always very happy to get our ALCS money, and we thank them, but always remember we've earned it.
Yes, and I see a comment in the chat from Some Bloke. Thank you, Some Bloke. Do the ALCS collect Writers' Digital Payments? So actually they don't, it's separate. So so you should, so and it's something again set up very much by the Guild, although all writers get it. There are payments from the BBC and from other broadcasters. There's ITV, and they pay a sum of money to the Writers' Digital Payments, and they get distributed as and when. But I know that children's shows do spectacularly well on iPlayer, so well in fact that they took them out of the charts because the makers of EastEnders, etc., were getting fed up of seeing the dumping ground, etc., next to them. So so if you look at what's done best in the iPlayer charts, you'll have to notice that be aware that there are actually children's shows doing just as well as those shows, but they're not putting them in. So that is so yeah, it does very well on iPlayer. So we've talked a bit about getting jobs writing on existing shows or joining teams that have been put together. But I think children's, it's just as challenging as it is in adult drama to get an original show away, isn't it? And you're sort of subject to the same vagaries and heartbreaks of the commissioning system. Because Lucia, you've developed some original work, haven't you?
This is a long time ago when I pitched an idea for an action adventure story set in the Caribbean, just reflecting my heritage, which they said would cost 1.2 million to make, so that didn't go ahead. But that was a long process of hammering out the story, and what Darren said about making sure that the behaviour couldn't be imitated, and sort of the restraints and what have you. So I enjoyed the process and just seeing what could and couldn't be done. Yes. But you know, the idea is still there. One day we'll be resurrected.
One day, yes. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that is the joy about creating original concepts, that, you know, at least nobody can take it away from you. You've got it there for when the people in charge see the light. Yes, imitable behaviour is one of the phrases which all children's writers are very aware of, along with Ed Poll. Yeah. There are lots of probably apocryphal stories of people saying, well, who is this Ed Poll? Can't we take him out to lunch and have a word with him? We are subject to quite strict rules, really, but they do change all the time. So, I mean, I always say that it's worth pushing the envelope and trying to get to an idea, because what's banned this week might be allowed next week. Conversely, what's allowed this week might be banned next week. Things change quite a lot. But in terms of getting original work away, I think Gail's got an absolutely inspirational story about Monty and Co, which is that she actually made this show. Do you want to talk a bit about how that came about, Gail?
Okay. And I was going to give a plug, because next year I'll do a separate event on what I call how to grow your own series from seed. I mean, basically, one of the first things I wrote was an ITV kiddie series called Pipkins with Hartley Hare, who terrified a lot of children, puppet. And it ran for 10 years on ITV, and it's still a little cult at times on DVD and that, but we all stayed friends. And that's, by the way, that's a separate and great lesson to learn, that, you know, be nice when you work and keep friends, because you'll end up working together again, and it's exponential. Your work together will grow. And we stayed, like I said, we stayed mates, and we all went and did our own things. And the puppeteer who played Hartley went on to run Jim Henson's workshop and do things called the Muppets. And you know, we also have the puppet creator was Muppets, and the other Pipkin's original writer. And anyway, there were 5 of us, and we just thought we want to work together again. And to be honest, we wanted to get out of what could be called the old system. Wonderful though all the companies have bid to us, but it can take a long time. You can give an original idea to one of the, you know, BBC or wherever, and it can take years until you hear back properly and go through the process. And we didn't want to do it that way. And basically, we created a new series, which was Monty and Co. We put some seed money in ourselves and qualified for tax breaks, started touting it around, and basically we raised finance ourselves. We made it before we sold it and had no idea who we were going to sell to. And to our delight and amazement, the BBC were the first to make an offer. And, you know, we never dreamed that we'd end up back at the BBC. And so, but when you make your own series, like we did, not only do you own the format, we own all the intellectual property and all the rights, including any merchandising, publishing, spin-offs. So you're investing in yourself and your company and your partners, but it's the most amazing fun. You know, you're going to do everything, including making the tea, but it's been fantastic. So to be heartily recommended.
Yes, thank you. I think it's you know, there's as we've said, it can be very difficult to get an original show off the ground. Have you got experience of that, Darren?
I've got experience of being rejected a lot. No, it's very hard. I've not had any show of myself. My own shows go off the ground, but like I say, it is very hard. I think the BBC did speak to someone a few years back. I think they get, this is just for animation, something like they look at 2,000 ideas a year, and maybe
Wow.
put money into 5 or 6.
Yes.
I mean, that's the ratio you're looking at. It's huge. So, you know,
that's why we developed it a bit more ourselves.
Yes.
Because also, I don't think people are as good reading scripts as they used to be.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. And we made a sizzle reel. And again, it cost, although, you know, we did a lot of it ourselves, but we did, you know, it was under 2 minutes, our sizzle reel. So people could see exactly what they were getting.
Yes.
You know, and also nothing, if I can say, it's happened to us all, nothing is ever wasted, because Lord knows we've all had shows rejected, and I won't say which one, but one pilot of mine has sold twice to 2 different companies, and the second company made it. So just change the title is the advice, so it doesn't show up in any computer checks. But you revisit things and you look at something years later and go, oh, now I see where it should go. And you just do it again.
Yes. Yeah, everything is always in the bottom drawer, isn't it? It's always there waiting to be resurrected. And maybe not even resurrected as a TV show. It could be a book or something else. It's all just material that could be revisited, and maybe you find a different angle on it.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I always say that and you know, Sarah was or sorry, Kate was asking for tips for writers, and I always say that there are fewer bad ideas than you think. I think a lot is in the execution, and I think particularly in children's, I think we're often being told you can't do that, nobody will buy that, and I think if you do it well enough and you do it in the right way, people will buy, you know, almost anything will work. It's in the execution. So I think, you know, I think we can often be very subject to very sort of strict rules in children's, and indeed to the same law of competition as everybody else. But I think it's important to hang on to your ideas. If you think something will work, to put it in the bottom drawer, but keep working on other things in the meantime. But I think, you know, don't give up on your ideas, really. That's what I think. So I think we'll have a couple more questions, and then I see we've got quite a lot of questions in the chat. So I think we'll move on to audience questions soon. But just first of all, I'm just going to ask everyone sort of what is the best thing about writing children's TV, and what, I mean, we've heard some great things already, but you know, what can you say to recommend it? Gail?
Well, on a crass level, it's employment and there's no heavy lifting. On another level, it's absolutely, look, I love writing. I'm very, very lucky to make my living writing. And it is great. I mean, I do a lot of comedy, and even my children's tends to be a lot of comedy. It's the most wonderful thing in the world to make people laugh. It is wonderful to make children laugh, and also to give them memories, because as we were saying, you know, children's series do stick with kids. I mean, the number of times I have people coming to me now and remembering just bits of a show that either you'd forgotten or you really went, really, I wrote that. But it's great to be able to do that. And it's very, and also there's nothing more satisfying than making a good show, because you're making a show first that you think is good, because you wouldn't put it out unless you believed in it. And I think that's also important, because people will say, oh, a company will say, we want this, we want that. The truth is, they don't know what they want until they see it, because it's going to be an original, it's going to be something they hadn't thought of, because it's nothing that can be jotted down at the back of an envelope. You're unique, and always remember, you're bringing something unique every time you write.
That's really inspiring. Thanks, Gail. And I think, and I agree about people don't know what they want until they see it. And I always, all the various children's channels do sort of put out briefs about what they want, but I always advise writers to take it with a pinch of salt, because what they actually commission is quite often very different to that. Darren, what do you think is the best thing about writing for children?
Oh, it's well, kids, I mean, it covers every genre, doesn't it? And it's not just one audience, it's several audiences. So you're writing for different age groups, different styles of writing. And it's just such a fun audience to write for. And that's what it comes down to. You can do so many silly things. You can do mad things in your stories, which you would never do in an adult show. I guess it appeals to the big kid in everyone, I guess. Certainly does for me. Yeah, it's just, and the actual, not just the actual writing, but that part of the industry itself is really fun, the friendly part of the industry. It's quite small, but it's a nice, friendly industry to work in.
Yes. People tend to sort of know each other, don't they? Darren, sadly not this year, but Darren for many years hosts a Christmas party for children's writers, which is extremely well attended and extremely popular. I used to always think of it as the beginning of the Christmas season, as it's held in early December. Sadly not this year, but hopefully next year we'll see many of you there. Lucia, what have you found good about writing for children?
Yeah, just to echo what everyone said, really, and I just find it like joyful, and also, and particularly with Jojo and Gran Gran, because so half my heritage is from St. Lucia, and Jojo and Gran Gran is about a St. Lucian grandmother and her granddaughter. And I always wish that something like that had existed when my children were small, that just a positive, joyful, fun children's program that just shows, a Black family doing normal, fun things and having adventures as well. And it leaves you with a warm glow. So when you write it, you have a warm glow. And you hope that the audience feel the same way when you watch it. So I always think it's like somebody said before, that you see the world reflected, you see your own world reflected back to you. Yes. Which I think is so important, because if you don't see it, it's like you don't exist.
Yes.
And so it's that joy of knowing that somewhere there'll be, Black families who can watch that, and that's going to be an important part of something that's positive in their lives, and that gives you a great feeling.
Yes, I think that it is really important, and I think sort of the representation of what seeing people's lives reflected back, and also, as they say, if you can see it, you can be it. I think it can be inspirational for people. Brings me on to a question which we've got from Annie Cusick Wood. What does the cultural diversity landscape in children's TV look like? Does it reflect the audience? What do you think about that, Lucia?
That's a very good question, because I don't know what the demographic for the audience is, but I'm guessing that it skews mostly middle class. But I don't know. I don't have the facts and figures. Usually, apart from Jojo and Gran Gran, I might be the only Black person in the room. Right. So, that's just a reality, but maybe that does reflect the audience. I don't have the facts and figures to be able to answer that. But I would say that if if we do discuss things in a room, and I find that children's is a place where you can alert people to how something might be perceived, and they will listen. And it might be that something hadn't occurred and you go, well, actually, if you write it like that, it's going to come across like this. And that might be quite negative. And so even being in the room allows you to influence the conversation and influence the narrative. So I think it's important, even if you're just one, to be able to do that.
Yes. And I think children's has sort of been slightly better than some other areas over the years at on-screen representation. I think particularly with the casting people with disabilities to play people with disabilities, and making that just not their main storyline. I think sort of children's was slightly ahead of the game in that way, but I think certainly, like everywhere, it can do better at representation, both on screen, but particularly off screen. I think it's possibly actually might be slightly better on screen than off screen. Gail, what do you think?
No, I agree. I think it has to get a lot better than it is. And also with, as you say, on-screen representation. But even if you're dealing with puppets, because you think puppets, sort of are every man or every puppet, and the answer is it's not, because you're dealing with different voices, different characters, and all the rest. And you do want to make sure that everybody's represented, because again, it's what we're saying, children have to see themselves reflected in what they watch, and other children have to see what the world is and who their friends are. Yeah, we all have to do a lot better. And it's something, I know it's something we're very aware of with Monty & Co. Yes. That we keep pushing for that. Are we doing enough? Well, we can always do better.
Yes. I have a question here. Is it a good idea to write a spec script of an existing kids show to have in your writing portfolio? I know what I think, but Gail, what do you think about that?
Yes, I mean, any script to me as a calling card is good, because if you're reading, if a producer or anyone is reading a script, they should be able to spot good writing within a page or two. And it drives me crazy when people don't, because, and they say, oh, well, you have to write it for this show or that show. If you're a decent writer, you should be able to work across a few different shows. I mean, yes, sometimes you might have trouble with one, but yes, if there's something that shows, that you can write, that's always a fantastic introduction.
But do you think that perhaps a new writer might be better spending their time on an original spec? Would you rather, as a producer of Monty & Co, would you rather read a spec of Monty, and would you be put off by a spec of Monty & Co, or would you think, wow, they've really done their research?
They'd have to really do their research, because every series has a house style, and they wouldn't have had the benefit of the Bible, the series Bible and all the rest. But no, I mean, go for it. Anything that shows enthusiasm. But you want to have a calling card, unless you want to write 10 scripts. You want to have a few calling cards that you can show to various people. I mean, what do you think? Sort of. I mean, Lucia, what would you do
in terms of
having? I mean, should one do write? If you want to get into, if you want to get into some children's writing, should you write a series? An episode of an existing series or an original?
Do you know, it's funny because the scripts that I sent for children's were crime stories, and I said, I've got nothing. I was just actually thinking about my previous answer. I think there was on another show there was a couple of black writers as well, so I just don't want to misrepresent. That's why I was slightly thinking. But generally, just to finish off the diversity thing, there aren't that many. But on that one, I sent crime drama. Can you imagine, for a children's show for CBeebies? But writing is writing,
Yeah.
Simon Nelson from BBC Writers' Room, who sort of has done a lot of work with children over the years, he always says, good writing is good writing. So sending off a spec, it doesn't necessarily have to to be a children's script. It can just be a script that shows an interesting original voice. And I think, like as with all writing, it's sort of, you're not just selling your script, you're selling sort of yourself, because you'll be very much involved in collaborating, creating a show with people once you're sort of part of a writing team. Which an interesting question in the chat, which I'll be surprised if anyone can, or well, I think we can theorize. Can anyone answer the biggest mystery? Why is the writing job market hidden? All other TV work is traditionally advertised. For a start, I'm not sure if all other TV work is traditionally advertised, but yes, I mean, it can certainly feel hidden, can't it?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's odd, isn't it? Because writing jobs are never advertised.
No.
But every other role kind of is. But then are producer jobs advertised? Is it an above the line, below the line thing? Are director jobs advertised, or is it all come through more an audition process? People seeking people out.
Yes, I think actually I think most creative jobs aren't traditionally advertised, which is something that it's quite it's interesting from a diversity point of view, and from a guild point of view, that it can, I think all these sorts of jobs can be a thing of who you know, which is interesting. Anyway,
but I mean, Matt, if I may, because Maddie just said on chat networking, and yes, Maddie, I think it's Maddie. Yes. Networking is very important, and you can network in a lot of different ways. Coming to things like this, also when you join the Writers Guild, it's a weekly email bulletin that you'll get, and it tells you what's happening, and if there are events or competitions, or sometimes who's looking for what. And also it's being proactive. It's seeing the series that you like, or let's say a producer or director's work you admire, and contacting them. And I know the BBC Writers' Room is good and has worked for a lot of people, but there's a whole lot of television outside the BBC and the BBC Writers' Room. So it's start being bolder. It's send emails. It used to be a lot easier when it was letter writing, because people didn't get many and they actually read them. But keep it short, an email, keep it simple, and it's a high. I mean, either if you want your work read, or saying, or what also sometimes work is just asking for advice to start with. Hi, I want to get into children's television. Can you tell me the most important thing that I should do? And anything that will start and open a conversation with a person is good.
I think, and I think we've got certainly one encouraging thing I could say is, I've seen another question on the chat. Is it almost impossible to get noticed without an agent? I think certainly it was my experience in children's that I got my first job and didn't have an agent, and I got my agent through that. I think children's, certainly some shows when they're looking for new talent will certainly consider unrepresented writers. What do you think, Darren?
Yeah, I was getting commissions for about 3 years before I got an agent, so I was kind of doing it on my own. I think, and that it comes back to the networking. It's also because I think I'd been working in TV anyway. I think there's something to be said if you do work in, or you can, if you want to be a writer, you may not be able to be a writer straight away. But if you get into another area, as production or script development, or even performing, and go into that route, that is a route into script writing.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. And script reading as well is something which I did, and through that I got into script editing and writing.
It also gives you a different view on the business and how things are put together and made. So it's a useful skill, I think.
And also lots of writers have day jobs and write in the evening and weekends. And it also gives you something to write about. my agent always knows a writer's burnt out when they write about writing. But there's no shame to having a day job and writing evenings or weekends or wherever. I mean, Anthony Trollope worked in the post office and used to get up at 5 in the morning to write a couple of hours before he went to work. Yes. And he ended up as Postmaster General and a jolly good writer. So, you know.
Thank you. Question for Gail. How did you approach broadcasters to take your original series?
Good question. A few different ways. Like I said, we had invested a little money, the 5 of us, so that we had a package to take round, including a couple of the puppets. But we had the Bible. I'm trying to think what we had by that point. We had the Bible and we had the sizzle reel. And fortunately, we were reasonably well known from our other work. And it's very good to go to things like the children's media conferences. You know, they have these various children's things. They can be a little expensive, but you meet the right people there. And even things like there's a festival they have that was in Lille in France called Series Mania. And I think they're still doing it online, and it's mainly for adults. But the good thing is you actually get the same thing at the CMC, and that you can actually, once you register, get appointments like speed dating. And I found Lille was very laid back, Series Mania, and you could just have chats with people and exchange. With Series Mania, it was very much European, but everyone was there. Because also remember, you're going to get money, hopefully, if you do production from a lot of different sources. And we won't go into EU sources right now. So it's look out for those, and also check which ones are good, because some are very famous and very expensive, and I would not recommend them at all. Because I don't think much work comes from it. The only people who profit from it are the ones who are running it. Again, the Guild is good at pointing people in the right direction.
Yes. So that which brings me on to another interesting question from the chat. With YouTube being the go-to place for most children, will the TV audience shrink and become less attractive to writers? I mean, I think there's quite a lot in that, because obviously children are watching traditional shows on their devices as well. But I think I think an answer could be writers grabbing the creative reins and doing what Gail did and making their own shows.
Also, a lot of parents don't want commercials. They want their children to either watch CBeebies or a children's platform where there's not pester power.
Yes.
You know, so there's a lot. There are a lot of outlets out there.
Yes.
And co-pros and getting money from different places.
Yes. Do you think it's something that you might be interested in, Lucia and Darren, developing your own shows as an independent producer, effectively? Darren?
It feels quite terrifying. I think you have to
form partnerships, Darren.
Yes, that's what you have to do. You can't do it on your own. I don't think. No. You have to.
No.
Yes, I think Gail is obviously very experienced and also knows a lot of people, so is able to put these things together. But I think in adult TV we're sort of seeing a rise of a writer showrunner, and is that sort of something you'd be interested in doing, Lucia?
I think so. I'm currently developing an idea for an adult drama, and just seeing what that process is. It's what Darren said about if you get a job in the industry, you see how things are put together. Because when I first started out, I thought I'll have my lovely idea, I'll sit at the computer, I'll float about, generate the ideas, and there's so much more. It's like raise the money. The production aspects it's quite fierce, really.
Yes.
And it's what Gail said before about be bold. So I'm sitting here just getting all inspired, thinking, yeah, actually, I'm going to get really bold and I'm going to think about that idea and pull that other idea out of the bottom drawer. Yes. Because why not? You know, so yes, it is something I'd like to do.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yes, I think should. And another question, which is sort of always on my mind, and it's a question in the chat about dealing with controversial topics. I mean, I sort of said before, I think there can be there's often pressure from above to play things safe, but I think and there are reasons why we aren't allowed to tell some of the types of stories from the more iconic 80s shows. But I think there are ways to deal with difficult and taboo topics when you're writing for younger ones. What are your thoughts on that? Gail, let's start with you.
Sorry, on what? On
writing about difficult or controversial or taboo topics for young people.
I think you've had that when writing for older children, I seem to recall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fashions change is the answer. But when writing for very little ones, there's something, I mean, it's safety first. It's you can never show a little one what not to do. Don't stick your finger in a socket, because they'll be at the socket sticking their finger in before you finish the sentence. But I think you have to be honest. And again, for very little ones, we discovered that when we were making Pipkins, because there originally was a Mr. Pipkins who sadly died during the series, which isn't funny. Sorry, he was, he was a very nice and elderly actor, and we had the choice: do we just obviously we were going to replace and have a new character come in, but we thought, no, let us say and explain what happened. It's very sad, but Mr. Pipkins died. And we still have had more letters about that saying, thank you for explaining it. And you do it simply and honestly, and then you carry on, and you have to leave kids happy. You don't want them opening a vein by the end of the show. And you have to go, but Johnny's come in now and he's going to take care of us and play with us. And that's something I want to resurrect. These are things that kids deal with. I mean, Sesame Street is the boldest one of all. They deal with parents in jail. They've done wonderful town halls for little ones about coping with the pandemic. There isn't anything you can't explain if you do it properly. But it's having the broadcaster who's bold enough.
Yes, I think it can often be about broadcaster nerves rather than writers' willingness to tackle topics, because I think actually touching on some of the darker aspects of life can actually help children with resilience if they've experienced it, or can set them up with resilience should they experience things in the future. And I think, when you talk about parents in prison, well, there will be some people in the audience with a parent in prison, or who've I wrote a story with a refuge because a child and parent were fleeing spousal abuse, and again, that's something which hopefully not many, but some of the audience will have experienced, and we got very positive feedback for showing that. Lucia, what do you think about dealing with more difficult topics and young people?
I wish we would do it more.
Yeah.
Because I think if you take young people through that process, what I call managed fear, and because if you take them through that process and they see, they see what the obstacles are, they see what the challenges are, but by the end you say, but you're safe, then they've been through that process, but you're still saying you're safe and I'm going to protect you, which I think is much more valuable for me than pretending that the world's a very cozy place, because for a large part of the audience it won't be.
Yes.
And I have a friend who used to work at the Priory and is set up as a private practice. And some of her clients are between 6 and 8 years old. And I think, and she said a lot of it is anxiety because their parents are very protective. So because their parents are very protective, the world is a very scary place. And now these children are seeing a psychologist.
Yes.
And I understand why people are protective. So that's what I talk about, the managed fear. And in actual fact, the reality is all fairy stories, or most of the fairy stories, are horror stories, aren't they?
Well, I think, you know, we laugh about the fact that I don't think CBeebies or CBBC would allow almost any fairy story in its original form. If you look at the sorts of things that go on for imitable behaviour and poor parental modelling. Darren, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think you can tackle pretty much anything as long as it's done with sensitivity, even for preschool. I mean, I think it was an episode of Bing Bunny which won, I think, the Writers Guild Award a few years back, which dealt with death.
I think I was on that panel. It was beautiful.
Yeah, basically, you know, using the metaphor of a burst balloon as the loss of a loved one, and that really worked. And so you can, you know, you have to. It's like I said at the beginning. You have to be aware of the audience and their comprehension and how they're going to react to it. It's all about, you don't want to scare any kid. And you have to be aware, even with older kids, you have to be aware that maybe, you know, it might be a show for 9-10-year-olds, but 5-year-olds might be watching it. So you have to be just sensitive to the audience, really.
Yes. I'm going to add on Monty & Co. We actually do have a child psychologist reading all our scripts.
Great.
And we can tell her our problems too. But it's great because she's an educational psychologist and she points us toward things we wouldn't have thought of. So it's you know, it's go gently. We're handling very delicate little people.
Yes, and I think, you know, more and more sort of children are being sort of formally sort of assessed as having anxiety. And to be fair, I'm sure children were always anxious. I think it's just we're better at putting a name on things now. But I think, as Lucia was saying, you know, managed fear and being able to because I think, you know, if children are too protected, then if something bad happens, then it will just destroy their whole vision of the world, and they think, you know, how can I cope now? Whereas if they sort of realize that bad things can happen, but you can get through it and good things can happen too, and it's part of a balanced view of the world, then I think that's a more helpful story to tell. I mean, I always say that one thing that I guess for me needs to be there in children's work, although actually you can point to sort of various famous books where it's not, but is hope. I think it's important that we present some hope to children, even with the bleaker stories. But yeah, I think it's important that that we keep trying to do better, keep trying to push stories and again, you know, I think things like diversity and you know, showing different cultures and different aspects of life. I think the more inclusive we can be, the better we can do. And I'm glad that Lucia's feeling inspired by Gail's words, because I am as well. I think well,
I was equally inspired by everyone else as well. What Lucia was saying, that it works. I mean, to me, in some ways, children's writing comes down to telling children it's all right to be you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant phrase. And yeah, so we've run slightly over it, and there's just so much we could talk about. But thank you so much to all three of you for your wonderful, helpful, considered answers. Sorry, I was dotting around a bit all over the place, but you know, it's a massive topic, and we've barely scratched the surface of it. But but you know, it's a wonderful, inspiring world to work in, and I hope that you've all enjoyed hearing about it. So thank you so much, Gail, Darren, and Lucia. You've been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. That was a really inspiring session. I just wanted to add to everyone, you know, if you've enjoyed the session today and any questions or issues have come up for you, please get in touch with us via our website. I've just pasted something into the chat box for you, or indeed if you'd like to join the Guild. We welcome all comers. It doesn't matter what stage you are in your writing career, whether you're a student, an aspiring writer, someone who's just changed career to write, as well as an established professional. You know, we're here to help you. Join your community, please get involved. And if you'd like to join us for our next Zoom event, the last this year, we will be in conversation with Amanda Coe, who has adapted Rumer Godden's novel Black Narcissus for a TV miniseries that will go out later this month. She'll be interviewed by former Writers Guild President Olivia Hetreed. Hope you can join us. Bye bye for now.
Thank you.